NC People's Power is a new and fast-growing movement representing over 80 organizations and counting across labor, community, faith organizations from the mountains to the ocean, from the big cities to our rural towns, and we will not stand idly by while nearly every aspect of our lives are under attack. No, we are united behind a people's agenda that reflects the North Carolina that we want and that we deserve. This includes investing in our children, funding health care, keeping bans off our bodies, defending our democracy, creating an economy for all, uprooting racism, and protecting our environment for future generations. We know that all of these issues are deeply interconnected, and we are united behind this platform. So without further ado, it is now my privilege to introduce our speakers for today. Their names and organizations and more information about the People's Power Coalition will be made available to members of the press, and we will take questions at the end. First, to speak about the ongoing attacks on our voting rights, I would like to introduce Cassandra Stokes from the NC Black Alliance.
Good afternoon. I'm Cassandra Stokes, Democracy and Economy Coordinator for NC Black Alliance. And for all the wrong reasons, North Carolina again is continuing to make headlines. We are currently witnessing political gamemanship where the people are losing. Where voters are losing, where Black people are losing, where students are losing, and where our rural residents are losing. In 3 disappointing rulings, our North Carolina Supreme Court reinstated a racially discriminatory voter ID requirement, repealed important safeguards against partisan gerrymandering, and suspended voting privileges for those with felony convictions. The court has handed North Carolina state lawmakers essentially limitless authority to alter voting districts and secure their own dominance indefinitely. To our North Carolina lawmakers, this is not a game. Your unchecked power is a remnant of Jim Crow that disproportionately silences Black voters and manipulates voting to lock in your own power indefinitely. How can we support measures titled the Election Day Integrity Act when lawmakers altered the law to make voting by mail more challenging, eliminating the 3-day period requiring that all absentee ballots be received by Election Day? What is election integrity after a record number of Black and brown voters cast mail-in ballots in 2020, and North Carolina politicians are now making it more difficult to cast ballots? When voters who are Black and brown once again are silenced, suppressed, and subjugated, once again I inquire about your integrity. So when Senate Bill 747 targets mail-in ballots and imposes a biased and unreliable signature matching system and making modifications that would increase the burden on our elderly, on our college students, on our disabled and our rural voters, as well as discrimination against communities of color throughout the state's mail-in ballot verification process. Senate Bill 747 also allows less time for voters to return their mail-in ballot and guts the popular same-day registration by making all registrants a provisional ballot. Now, who suffers the most? Our HBCUs and our college students. So today we stand here to increase awareness and let you know that our voices and our vote cannot be gerrymandered. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra. Next, it is a privilege to introduce State Representative from District 73 in Cabarrus County, Representative Diamond Staten Williams.
Thank you.
You don't even have to move the mic.
Not much. I probably need to stand on my tiptoes. But good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all again for being here. I've been probably brutally honest and very transparent about the fact that my mom has a mental health condition and my grandmother helped raise me. I struggled with reading and had great support from my first grade teachers and subsequent teachers after that, and then in Communities in Schools, which is a program that provides additional support for at-risk youth like myself. When kids with similar backgrounds as myself face adversity, the only thing that keeps us going is hope. Hope for a better future. And I remember sitting in many of my classes, English to math to social studies, and even sitting with my grandmother talking about our land of opportunity and thinking one day all of this will be different. I am still a very hopeful person by nature. I often wonder how North Carolina's children, such as my son, feel today, sitting in their social studies classes, current events classes, and learning about some of the things their representatives are doing here in Raleigh. Do they read about how drastically the legislative body is changing voting rights in North Carolina? And I start to wonder if their vote matters, if they will think that their vote matters. And that brings me pause. Do they see the courts rule in favor of gerrymandering and against the people and think, will it ever be different? The reality is that extremists are taking over North Carolina. I know it's probably very jarring for me to say that and for people to hear that, but it is a fact. Trust me, this is something that I would not want, and I know many people do not want this as well. Extremists are limiting popular voting options among working people, like myself, because I'm still working today, and people like that you see behind me. Things such as same-day voting registration and absentee mail-in voting and implementing discriminatory practices and signature matching on mail-in ballots, that is what's happening today here. But I don't want us to get lost because that's not just the worst of it. There's more. Remember on January 6th, I think all of us remember, SB 747 lays the groundwork for election worker harassment, mass challenges, and discrimination by pushing a very false and dangerous narrative about our elections. Our children read about these current events in class. My son talks to me about it. And it's hard to imagine how hopeful they feel as I once did. I wonder what it must feel like to know that adults were so preoccupied with their extremist agenda that they are not listening to the voices of the people. That hope that I knew as a child, hope built into our nation's very DNA, is being taken from our children with very extremist pieces of legislation. And as a mother of 2 young adult daughters and 1 teenage son, I wonder, is this what we want for the next generation, especially here in North Carolina? Is this truly what we want? To be moving backwards instead of forwards. I can see many heads nodding. No one wants to go backwards. Young me, I'm still sitting in our social studies classes, and it wasn't wrong for me to have hope. It's never wrong to have hope. We can make it better, but we have to fight. When I say fight, we have to fight these extremists. Extremists who would rather limit the opportunity than give it. Dream hoarders who want power more than decency and democracy, who believe the only way they succeed is by putting others down and othering people. But we didn't get the nickname of Land of Opportunity for no reason, right? And we can get back there. But first, we have to say no. We have to say no very loud. We have to say it with our voices today and every day going forward. We have to say it with our votes. Thank you.
Amen. Next, to speak about our state budget, please welcome Susie Kachaturian, Senior Policy Advocate at the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susie Kachaturian. As Reverend Lisa said, I'm a senior policy advocate at the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center, and we're here to stand together with the People's Power Coalition as part of this day of outrage against legislative attacks on all North Carolinians. I specifically want to focus on attacks coming in through the budget and the budget process. The state budget is a moral document that guides our collective tax dollars to accomplish more than each of us could do on our own. Our state budget is foundational to every aspect of our lives, from roads and schools to the water we drink and the boards of elections that we rely on. Our budget must reflect the priorities of the people of North Carolina, not just the priorities of the powerful and wealthy few. It cannot be used as a political weapon. Our budget must require that corporations and the wealthy pay what they owe through taxes. It is through a collective commitment that we can fund a brighter future for all North Carolinians. Yet North Carolina's budget process has become increasingly politicized over the years, and this year appears to be no exception. A budget is always about choices. But when fewer people get to make decisions and fewer opportunities for input are provided, the budget gets further and further from reflecting the needs of our communities. As the state approaches the end of the fiscal year, which is coming up at the end of June, and as the Budget Conference Committee makes decisions behind closed doors, we call upon legislative leaders to open up the process and hear from people across the state. Don't give us arbitrary spending numbers. Show us that you have assessed our real needs. Don't present the budget and require a vote in less than 48 hours. Give the people and policymakers time to review it. Don't block public comment during committee hearings. Provide the public with opportunities to share their priorities directly in Raleigh and provide adequate notice so people can come to Raleigh and take time off work to come to Raleigh. Don't divert the wealth that our collective work creates to profitable corporations. Stop the scheduled elimination of the corporate income tax and protect the revenue that we have in this state for the people's priorities by rejecting the Senate's tax plan that will result in more than $7 billion in revenue lost each year once it's fully implemented. North Carolinians deserve to live in a state where our collective needs are met by pooling resources together in an equitable way, where those with more pay more, and where corporations pay what they owe through taxes. This is how we move our state forward, by taking care of each other, not by giving breaks to corporations and the wealthy, while millions across the state struggle to meet their basic needs. Lastly, North Carolinians overwhelmingly agree on the priorities that our budget must fund. Access to care and health care through expanded coverage with Medicaid, community safety, infrastructure, affordable housing, economic growth for all, including supports for small businesses, providing good-paying jobs and job training for workers, children's education, quality care during childhood, and the ability to participate in free and fair elections, as you've heard. It is time for North Carolina leaders to show that they value the people, not corporate donors and campaign contributions. For too long, everyday North Carolinians have been removed from the process that affects every single facet of our lives. We're here to remind lawmakers that they work for us, and we need a budget that works for North Carolinians. Thank you.
It's the people's money. Let's see a people's budget. Next, I would like to introduce State Representative from District 100 in Mecklenburg County, Representative John Autry. You're going to need some for that.
Thank you, and I'm so impressed with the way that folks can read off of those mobile phones without spectacles or something. That's a great advantage, I feel. So but I'm not going to read anything. And I am John Autry. I currently serve you in the North Carolina House of Representatives from District 100, which is basically East Charlotte. And I really appreciate the coalition for being here today and turning out all these great folks and delivering this important message that we need to hear. I am fortunate to, along with my wife, Rebecca, have 4 children, 4 great children, 3 daughters and 1 son. And one of my daughters is in a same-sex marriage. And she is fortunate that she can have that opportunity where she resides to fulfill herself and realize and live her true self with her partner and her spouse. I'm so grateful for that they have that advantage, thanks to Mr. Obergefell. With children come grandchildren sometimes, and I'm fortunate to have 6 great grandchildren. One of those identifies as trans. One of them identifies as gay. And my concern for them is about the sort of legislation that we're seeing being introduced in the General Assembly this year. The kind of things that target them, discredit them, marginalize them even more, and compound the issues that they're having to deal with as they find their way through this world. Families are complicated mechanisms, and you can't write legislation to meet every family's needs. But you can certainly write legislation that hurts children. And that's what we're experiencing this session, is lots of legislation that keeps dropping, and it's like a slow drip that just gives the kids something else to worry about and concern themselves with, instead of trying to find themselves and be themselves and find their way through this world. I hate that we have to do this, but it is so important that you call this foolishness out for what it is. It is not helping these children who are dealing with a lot of issues already. And in turn, you end up hurting a lot more kids than you think you're going to help. From the sports bans to denying them the care that they are desiring. Fortunately for my grandchild, she didn't have to deal with this. She's 20 years old now. She'll be 21 this month. And fortunately, the family coalesced around her and supported her in this journey. She had the kind of love and support that all children are worthy of, and all children should be entitled of. And you cannot do that with this kind of legislation that we've been seeing popping up. This is about marginalizing a small group of children who don't have a voice for themselves yet. And you're attacking them and ostracizing them and making life worse for them. You're going to hurt more children than you're helping. These children who are dealing with their gender identity and trying to affirm themselves, they need love and acceptance. And whenever these kinds of bills are introduced by their government, the government that should be responsible for the safety and protection of all children, seems to be having the opposite effect. So I would hope that leadership in this building can find a way to put an end to this and stop this foolishness from passing forward. Thank you here for being here today. I appreciate this opportunity, and I'm really tired of talking about this. I want it to stop, and I want it to stop yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you for speaking from the heart. Our final speaker today, who will also be speaking about the ongoing immoral attacks on LGBTQ people, I'd like to introduce and welcome my colleague, Reverend Vance Haywood, pastor of St. John's Metropolitan Community Church.
Thank you, and thank you, Representative Autry. As many of us can attest, we're all tired of having to talk about this, but as much as we're tired of having to talk about it, queer kids and trans kids are tired of having to live with it. LGBTQ plus people are tired of dying every day because of it. I am here as an out queer man, out queer person of faith, who happens to have the joy of pastoring at the queer church here in Raleigh, North Carolina, at Metropolitan Community Churches, a faith community that was founded more than 50 years ago by queer and progressive Christians alike, with a simple goal: to love. To love as our Creator has taught us unconditionally. MCC was founded as much as a social justice movement as it was a denomination, standing for the rights of LGBTQ plus persons who were faced with injustice, hatred, and discrimination. We stand here today facing those same abuses across many states, including right here in our own state of North Carolina. In the month that we celebrate Pride, we have to remember that Pride started out as a riot. And so as we celebrate, we also remember the work that has to be done, that needs to continue to save lives. This year, the North Carolina General Assembly has carried out a blatant attack on LGBTQ plus people, issuing an unprecedented onslaught of hate legislation. House Bill 574, a trans sports ban, and Senate Bill 631, a trans sports ban that we also expect to have gender-affirming care bans included in it. And then Senate Bill 49, which is North Carolina's version of the Don't Say Gay bill, are all moving forward. In the United States of America, LGBTQ plus youth attempt suicide every 45 seconds. Check my math, but that's about 40 youth that will attempt suicide while we're standing here today. Because they didn't feel loved, they didn't feel like they could be themselves because of things like this. In the United States of America, hate legislation like this does nothing to protect us. In fact, the mere existence of these proposed bills causes harm. We know already queer and trans youth are suffering increased mental health challenges, and we know of at least one death that is directly related to legislation that's been pushed this year. If passed, these bills will cause irreparable harm to countless North Carolinians. And the most sickening and disturbing part of all of this is the tactics that are being deployed behind it. These bills do nothing to protect us. They are designed to manipulate people and to secure a win in the next election. Let me say that a different way. These people are pushing these things and willing to sit idly by while they go through for the sake of political expediency and power and gain for personal purposes and political party purposes. They're willing to kill young people while they sit by and push because we're going to win the next election. Those people who vote for these things and remain silent while they push through are at minimum politically pandering, but I would say borderline on terrorism when you use fear to control the outcome of an election. The North Carolina Constitution says, if you'll permit me for just a second, that the people of this state have an inherent sole and exclusive right of regulating the internal government and police thereof, and of altering or abolishing their constitution and form of government wherever it may be necessary to their safety and happiness. But every such right shall be exercised in the pursuance of law and consistently with the Constitution of the United States. I put it to us today that the people of North Carolina have endured a long train of abuses and usurpations and pursuing an invariable the same object evidences and designed to reduce them under absolute despotism by all three branches of our state government. This list of abuses and usurpations include but are not limited to gerrymandering election maps and establishing barriers to free and fair elections, criminalizing personal health care decisions, and outlawing the right to express ourselves openly and freely. As such, now is the time for the citizens of North Carolina to actively pursue their constitutional right, moral obligation, and ethical imperative to regulate and alter the governance of North Carolina for the safety and happiness of the citizenry in the manner exercised in the pursuance of law and consistent with the Constitution of the United States. Somebody is hurting our brothers and our sisters, our parents and our children, our neighbors and our friends, and we cannot be silent anymore. And I'll close by saying this conversation, this warning, if you will, as we set out to use our voices, is not only for those who author and sponsor and file and vote for oppressive and tyrannical, dehumanizing laws, those who try to profit by seeking funding, votes, and fame based on the association or affiliation, but never lifted their voice, put forth an argument, or took up the fight for the will of the people, are on notice as well. I'm reminded of a passage from the letter of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King from a Birmingham jail. He said, "The moderate is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice." That is what we seek today, the presence of justice. Somebody is hurting our sisters and our brothers. Somebody is hurting our parents and our children, our neighbors and our friends. We will not sit idly by. We won't accept compromise, and we will not be silent anymore.
Thank you, Reverend. I want to thank again all of our speakers for today and all of our elected officials who have also come to hear the will of the people. As you have just heard, we are outraged by the onslaught of attacks on LGBTQ youth. And Speaker Moore and Senate President Berger, don't you dare say that this is what the people of faith in North Carolina want. Don't you dare. Because we know that 65% of people of faith in our state support laws to protect LGBTQ plus people from discrimination. As you have heard today, people of faith and people of all creed and of all moral conscience are sick and tired of politicians using religion as their justification for hateful bills that attack our LGBTQ youth. We are sick of it. We are outraged by the General Assembly's effort to deny our children the right to a sound, basic education, a right promised to them in our state's constitution. They should be ashamed of themselves. We are outraged by the fear and scarcity that is inherent in the proposed state budget. We are outraged by the monster voter suppression bill, SB 747, moving through the General Assembly today. And let me just say that if the elected officials pushing this legislative agenda really believed that this was the will of the people, they wouldn't be working so hard to take away our voting rights. Though we face this onslaught of attacks on our democracy, our public schools, LGBTQ rights, workers' rights, healthcare, housing, and so much more, we will not be divided across these issues. As the People's Power Coalition, we are united not only in our anger, but in our belief that a new North Carolina is possible. In this moment, we are called to interrogate the limits of our imagination. We are called to deepen our faith in the power of the people. That is what we are here today to do. I think about our state seal. That woman holding that cornucopia meant to symbolize in our state seal the spirit of abundance. I want to end in that spirit. We are going to keep fighting, but it doesn't have to be this way. There is enough for all North Carolinians to thrive. There is enough to fund our schools. There is enough to affirm and strengthen our democracy. There is enough. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. We are here today to reject a narrative built in fear and scarcity, and to come together to co-create a North Carolina in which everyone has what they need to thrive. So to the leadership of the General Assembly, hear us loud and clear. The people of North Carolina are outraged, we are organized, and we are not going to stop until we get the North Carolina that we deserve. Thank you. And now we will take any questions from the media. Yes.
This is a question for Reverend Haywood. You mentioned when you were speaking about a death related to these bills. I don't know what you're able to share about that, but can you share any information about that?
We know it was a death by suicide, and the note left indicated the reasons behind it, but out of protection for the family and the person and their friends and their safety, we can't disclose more than that. Yes, it was a young person under the age of 18.
Absolutely. So the provision for voting by mail, eliminating that 3-day window after the election, that is going to spoil a lot of people's votes, wouldn't you say? I think one of the biggest things that we have to do, especially as a community, is make sure that we're speaking up and advocating for the people who can't be here today, and making sure that we get that done for them and amending that. Absolutely. I think it does, and I'm going to look back to my colleagues for this. I believe that it does specify exactly what happens, that vote would come back to either the Speaker of the House or no, he walked out. He walked out, yeah. But it either comes back to the Speaker of the House or the Speaker of the Senate. Cassandra, can
No,
you-
I was just saying, I think that's the part that we're all unclear on. So.
yeah.
This is what comes when you are rushing legislation
We're all
without
very,
considering all the unintended consequences.
we're all very unclear.
Any final questions? Well, again, thank you again for being here today. We have people across the state. We have people from Asheville, from Wilmington, every nook and cranny of the state gathering today for this lobby day for our 6 o'clock rally. Thank you again. If you have any questions for our speakers, I'm sure they're still available. We have a list of all the speakers and the platform of the People's Power Coalition available to the press. Oh, we have one more question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm not super familiar on in the proposed budget, did they end up proposing any increase for state employees?
Susie, would you like to take that question, or Dante?
2.5%. And what has inflation been in the last year?
Not that.
Like at least 5%, right?
Over
So
6%.
it would be a pay cut.
Yes.
I hear the teachers might get a sweet $250 raise as well. So, really, of course. Can't spend that all at once. Again, the spirit of abundance in full display here in the state budget. Thank you for that question. Any final questions? Thank you again, and thank you to our members of the press for joining us today.